All right, we're going to be working on the Permagreen today. I've had this machine quite a few years, and over the years I've done a lot of different modifications to it. So my main goal with the machine has always been to try to increase my spray volume and to also not have to deal with the pump losing prime as it gets towards the bottom of the tank. So I've got a few modifications I want to try today. So far up to this point, I've kept everything as close to factory as I could keep it, but today we're going to be bypassing some of the valves up top. And this may or may not be the modification for you. If you wanted to go this route, you may have to add in some additional modifications in order to use your trim tips. But either way, we're going to be taking the pump off. We're going to be cleaning the pump and reinstalling it. So be a good tutorial for that as well. The biggest issues I've had with this machine is the spray pump. Here's your spray pump, sits right here. It runs off of a pulley, which runs off your drive belt. It also runs the fertilizer spreader. Really neat design, but it's just very underpowered, and the biggest problem that I've had with this unit so far is drawing air into this pump when the tank gets low. It's very aggravating, and I can't seem to get the prime to come back even when I open up the bleeder valve and prime it just like the manual says. I've had success sometimes with it, sometimes I don't. So we're going to try to reroute some of these lines here. This is your suction side. We're going to try to reroute that to where it's a little bit less of a loop down in here, and maybe we won't have as much air buildup coming from the tank. Even if you're not having these problems, this would be a good video on how to remove the pump and reinstall the pump, and I'm also going to show you how to clean the pump. First thing I always like to do is get this hopper plate out of the way. It's got 4 screws on the block. That block will slide up and the whole thing will pull out. Next thing here, we've got the suction line of the pump, and then back here, the discharge line of the pump. So when you unplug those, you can expect a little bit of water to come out depending on how much you have in your tank. You want a pretty low tank or either a shut-off valve on the tank. And there you go, it just pops out like that, and that hose is going to pull straight out. Last thing left to do is get these 5/16 bolts off the top, and they are actually tapped right into the pump. There's your flow jet pump that runs on the Permagreen Magnum. There's only a couple places to find these. You can get them directly from Permagreen, but you can also find a few other sources if you go online and just look for it. So we'll take a look at how this system works. So your tank sits right here, and I put a couple aftermarket pieces on here. I've got a ball valve to cut my tank off. I put an external filter, and shortly after I took the filter out of it, so that was a waste of time and money. Goes down, and this is the suction side of the pump that we took off. Here's your discharge line of the pump. It runs down, and there's a T in here. That T comes out, splits off into another T, and the one that goes down the bottom comes out the other side. Open this valve, run your pump wide open, and it should suck all the air out of it. This other T goes upward, comes up to the top of the tank, and drops down into the tank, and that's your agitation line. It comes out, comes around. This is your main spray valve. When you open this, this is what sprays to the system. That's on your handlebars. Comes out here, splits again, goes back up to the top of the tank, comes up to these control valves. So you got your high speed broadcast, high speed trim, low speed broadcast, low speed trim. So you just turn one valve on at a time. That's off. So then it comes back out of the back side of each one of these units, and that's where they're going to come around right here. So this comes out, tees off, both of these go up to the top of your tank. What I'm going to do is come off this side, come around, and I'm going to run it straight to my high-speed broadcast nozzle, and that will eliminate probably 10 or 15 feet of line. That's going to be the first step that I do. If you use your trim nozzle and your low speed gear, I would not recommend doing this because you're not going to be able to go back to either of those in this configuration. All right, now when I pull this spray lever on the handlebars, it's going to open that valve up, and the valve is going to go directly to this broadcast spray tip. This pump is pretty easy to rebuild. We're just going to take these top screws out that run around the rim of this pump, and just pay close attention to how it comes apart when you take it apart. This is the part that we're concerned with. That's where your diaphragm pump is. We're going to take the top screws out right here off this plate. You got a small diaphragm under here. You just want to check it and inspect it, make sure it looks clean. One thing you can do before you completely separate the pump is just make you a little mark with something that will scratch it on there so you can see where it goes back together. I'm not 100% sure it really matters which way this orients back on, because all those diaphragms are pretty well the same. So if you take a look at the diaphragms on the pump, you can see I do have some stuff inside the pump itself. And we're just gonna go through and clean it out, but I'll show you there's a little piece of a leaf in there. There's some type of material. If you can see it on this lower diaphragm here, there's a piece of trash right there. It's hard to tell what that really is. It looks like a piece of plastic. Maybe that came off one of the internal portions of the pump. And then there's another piece of trash. So overall, it looks pretty clean. I'm just gonna go around with a rag, clean up that O-ring well. I'm gonna look up under all these little diaphragm parts, make sure there's nothing else wedged up under the diaphragm. You just wanna be real careful not to tear through any of your diaphragms here, because that's what's building your pressure. All right, so that just sets right back on top of there. It's got a rim around it. So just line your marks back up. Then on your shaft, you've got a flat piece, and you can see it's flat right here where it accepts it up inside. So when I pulled it off my machine, it was mounted just like this with the screw holes towards the top. And on the upper side was the outlet, and you can see I've got an arrow here, and that points to the discharge side or the outlet. And then underside was the inlet, and that's how it was mounted, so that's how it goes back on oriented. So I believe I'm actually going to orient mine different than what it was when I pulled it out. I'm going to orient it to where the suction side is going to be closer to the tank, and the discharge side is going to be where the suction side was. That way it might help me eliminate some of the air out of the system, shorten up the intake line about 6 or 8 inches. So since we swapped the discharge line to the front of the pump, this discharge piece, I'm going to have to take it off, and we're going to add a longer piece onto it. And then the suction line, since it's closer to the tank, we're going to end up cutting this suction line off somewhere back in here to shorten it up. And hopefully that little loop will get rid of some of the air entrapment as well. So we got the tank filled up with water. We got about 4 gallons in it. Next thing we're going to do is crank the machine, and we're going to bleed it out the back valve just like you would on a regular priming. And this should ideally get all the air out of the system. Then we're going to spray the front nozzle, check out our pattern. We're also going to check out the gallons per minute and see if we got an increase in gallons per minute. Looks like we put out about 43 ounces in 20 seconds. So I can't believe it. Looks like we actually did see a gallons per minute increase, and that was simply by shortening the suction line. We do know the pump's primed. It's spraying out a really good pattern. So as you can see in the tank, we've only got about 3 gallons in the tank. In the past, when I was trying to get it primed, I couldn't get it primed until I got it up to 7 or 8 gallons. I guess just the head pressure is what I was counting on priming the pump. So far, the results seem pretty promising. I know we cleaned out a little bit of debris out of the pump, so that probably helped a little bit with getting the prime established. But it did prime significantly easier than it has in the past, and the gallons per minute are up a little bit, so that's a positive as well. If you wanted to decrease the gallons per minute, just put a smaller nozzle in. I've got the biggest nozzle that T-Jet offers in a flood jet style to try to get the most gallons per minute I could out of the pump. So here you can see the setup that I'm running. I've got the suction coming in up under on the back side of the pump where you can't see it. It was originally on this side of the pump, so we shortened up the suction line probably 8 inches, maybe even close to a foot, and then we put the discharge on this side, and then the discharge is going into its normal tie. Nothing changed there. It's coming up to this spray valve, and then coming out of here, I directly ran it in to my high-speed broadcast nozzle, and that's the only one I ever use. I don't ever do any trimming with that spray tip. If you use your trim tip, this would not be the setup for you. I've never used low gear ever, even on super steep hills, so if you use that, then this wouldn't be the setup for you either. All right, we're back the next day. I've got a correction to make on the video while I was editing. Correction from yesterday, this jumper that I made coming off of my main spray valve comes down to this broadcast nozzle. I was calling that the high-speed broadcast nozzle. That's actually my low-speed broadcast nozzle. That's a TFVS 7.5. This is my high-speed broadcast nozzle. It's a TFVS 1.0 or 10. So I'm gonna switch those around, and we're gonna see what our calibration comes out to be. So originally I was calibrating this one around 40 to 42 ounces per thousand, and yesterday we got this 7.5 at 42 ounces per thousand. So the calibration has definitely gone up. Let's check and see what our new calibration is on our high speed nozzle. So it looks like we're setting right around 50 ounces per 1,000 square foot. So that's a huge increase from what we had it at before we ran that small jumper line. So now I want to check out the spray pattern and see what it's looking like. One key note on the spray pattern is this unloader valve. This is your agitation valve down in the tank. This is also what recirculates the volume whenever you have the main spray valve closed. That way the pump isn't in a deadheaded situation. But I've actually got the 30 PSI adapter cap on the top to try to get more volume coming out the end of my tips. Factory is 20 PSI. If you put that 30 PSI cap on there, then it's gonna make your spray pattern spray wider, up to 14 feet. One thing I wanted to mention if somebody was gonna attempt this is I have already upgraded my machine with what Permagreen calls a half-gallon kit. So one thing I've done on my spray system is upgraded everything to this larger line. Got an upgraded adapter here that takes it to the 3/8 inch line over the 1/4 inch line. These are new elbows that come into your valve. So all this has been upgraded to that larger line. So if you're going to attempt this with the factory 1/4 inch line that Permagreen gives you, it may or may not give you quite as high of a calibration. Next thing I want to show you is running the system completely out of water and sucking a bunch of air into the lines. And I'm going to see how easy it is to reprime. So while we got the tank empty, I wanted to show you one of the mods that I did. So I removed the intake screen that comes factory on the Permagreen, and I changed it to an external filter that you see there. That way you didn't have to reach your hand into the tank to clean the filter if it got clogged up for any reason. Another thing I did was added a lead weight on the end of it. You can see right here, this lead weight actually helps keep it down in the solution. Otherwise, it tended to float to the top of the solution when you got down to about a gallon or so left in your tank. I also have the new setup for the recirc. It's got a nozzle on the end, so it kind of increases the pressure whenever it's doing agitation. The factory one just kind of spilled out into an open-ended pipe, and it didn't have any pressure or anything with it. This has more of like a jet type effect. So I've got the tank filled up to 3 gallons, and we're going to go through the priming procedure for this Magnum. So what we're going to do is fire the engine up. We're going to rev it up to 4 RPMs, open the bleeder drain valve on bottom, let it bleed all the air out of it, close the bleeder drain valve, and then check our calibration on our spray nozzles. I believe 48 ounces is down a little bit from what we saw initially. It's not too low, but that is one of the points that I wanted to make with this system is sometimes it'll look prime and it will spray a beautiful pattern, but it won't be putting out the same ounces per 1,000 square feet as what it did maybe the last time you sprayed. So that's one of my biggest aggravations with this pump and this spray system setup. And that's another point that I wanted to stress, that you really need to be checking your calibration before you go out each time you fill your tank up. On another note, it is a night and day difference in priming this pump. I mean, we ran it completely out of solution, let it pull air through it for probably 10 seconds or so, and then refilled it up to only 3 gallons as opposed to a full tank, which if you fill up to a full tank, you got a lot more head pressure to push the air out of the system. With 3 gallons in there, you really don't have hardly any at all. So I'm very happy with how this modification is done. I just don't use my trim tips enough to really justify it, and for what I use it for, this is going to be way better for me because it's a whole lot less of a headache. Hopefully this video helped y'all out. Every machine's got a little bit of a flaw to it. The spray system's kind of the setback on this one, but we're slowly making it better and better as we experiment with new things. So stay tuned for some more videos. I'm sure there'll be more to come on this Permagreen Magnum.